I think if you're a person of color, you're going, welcome to my world. If you're a white person, you're probably saying, I had no idea it was this bad. But what I like, what is happening in this country is it's something that everybody is discussing. People are saying we're at a very difficult crossroads. We're at an inflection point. We're at a tipping point. All of that is true. But what we all know is that everybody says we've got to do something. Things have got to change. We've got to make it better. And that's why I think this conversation is so important, because we've got two business leaders that want to engage, that want to do exactly that to make it better. Randall Stephenson, is chairman and CEO of AT&T. He's been a leader on this issue for quite some time. Suzanne Clark is the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She and the Chamber have committed to using the organization's convening power and influence relationships to address the opportunity gaps in America. So we want to start the conversation today with Randall Stephenson. Hey, Randall Stephenson, it's really good to see you.
Hi, Gail. Good to see you as well.
Let me just say this to you. They say they do everything big in Texas, starting with even COVID outbreaks. As you know, Texas, California, Florida have the biggest outbreaks right now. So I'm curious about how it is for you in Texas. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. My
I know you are, but I'm talking about your state. Yeah.
But yeah, the state is, you said it, we're experiencing a spike, and we reopened this economy, which I thought was very, very important. I don't think, though, we in our communities are executing as we should to ensure that we mitigate the spread of this. And so, just the basic things of wearing masks in public. Yeah. I just see us being too lax, and I think we're seeing the results of that. So it's time for us to kind of just shore up what we're doing and let's live responsibly and behave responsibly in our communities.
But this is the thing about COVID, Randall, is, it went from COVID, a health crisis, to a financial economic crisis, and now we're in the middle of a racial crisis. Really, it's racial strife all over the place. It's like you've got three different things going on at the same time, none of them good. The world is in such an unsettled place, dare I say a very painful place for most people, where we're all trying to figure it out, all trying to figure out what to do. And, I've heard you say corporate leaders need to step up. And this is the thing that I like about you, Randall Stephenson. You started talking about Black Lives Matter back in 2016. This was before George Floyd, before Ahmaud Arbery, before Breonna Taylor, before Rayshard Brooks. So I'm wondering what was going on in your life in 2016 that you said this is something that we need to pay attention to. Did you have a Black friend that said, hey, Randall, you need to pay attention? What happened?
It was a culmination of things. You had the Michael Brown situation in St. Louis, an unarmed Black man shot and killed. And you had another situation right on the heels of it up in Minnesota. Then you had Baton Rouge. And then you're looking out behind me. You could look one block this way. 5 police officers were killed as kind of as a result, as this all kind of led up to that moment. And I had a very close friend who is Black. I spent the weekend with him last weekend, in fact, and he and I had a very candid conversation. And I was about to give a talk to a group of our internal employees, and after that conversation, I had a speech given to me that I was going to make, and it talked about the need for tolerance. And I remember looking at this and just telling you that this is not about tolerance. Every time we talk about race, people want to talk about tolerance. We've blown through tolerance. It's time to set tolerance aside. And I made the comment, tolerance.
I never want to be tolerated, Randall. I never want to be tolerated.
Who does, right? I don't want to be tolerated, right? Yeah. And so it was time to say, look, we have an issue. And in America, we had an issue in 2016. We pick our head up here in 2020, we got the same issue. And so I know you are getting tired. I'm tired, but it's time that we step up. And as I've said, corporate America cannot sit this one out.
But does this feel different to you? Are you seeing different conversations, having different conversations than you've ever had before?
They're radically different. And to that point, that corporate America can't sit this one out. CEOs are all leaning forward and saying, look, we have a problem. You cannot watch the George Floyd encounter and walk away with anything other than saying we have a problem. And as a result, we have to engage. And the business community is finally recognizing and saying it's time to engage. And guess what? Our politicians are telling us that we're out of our swim lane. We were told this yesterday, that we're out of our swim lane. And I'll be honest with you, I get a little frustrated because at least we're in the pool now. And I feel like right now, as of yesterday, our Senate isn't even in the pool. And I would be happy to step out of these swim lanes and not have to engage as CEOs the way we are if the Senate and our Congress people and our leaders would get into the pool.
Why do you think, Randall, it took CEOs in corporate America to really notice this? Because this is not a new problem, as you point out. What took so long?
So I'm in the BRT, and so I'm very active in this process through the BRT, Business Roundtable. Mm-hmm. And think about that group of 200 companies. We have 15 million employees. That's how many people work for the BRT. When this situation hit with the George Floyd and then the other situation, Breonna Taylor and so forth, our employees started saying, where are you? Where are we as a company? Where do we stand as it relates to these issues? And we can't tell our employees that it's not our swim lane. Our employees expect us to engage. So I think, candidly, what's happened is our employees are pushing CEOs in corporate America to engage on this.
As a CEO, is it a moral obligation or is it a business opportunity? Are they mutually exclusive?
They're not mutually exclusive. First and foremost, it's a moral opportunity. This is an issue of justice, period. And what we're dealing with here is patent injustice that is pervasive as it relates to the Black community and interactions with law enforcement. So, we're a country that is premised on the idea of justice. The opening paragraph of our Constitution said it's to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility. And if you think about that, those are in that order for a reason. You don't get domestic tranquility without justice. And so we have a moral imperative to ensure that everybody in our country has access to justice. Now, set that aside, domestic tranquility, there's a business imperative. We as businesses do not thrive without domestic tranquility. And so if you want domestic tranquility and the business proposition that goes with it, you better have justice on the front end. So they go hand in hand. I don't think you can separate the two of them.
You see CEOs getting involved in policing?
CEOs are now involved in policing. At the BRT, I've been asked to head up a subgroup that tackles what are the changes that need to happen to policing in order to ensure that we have just treatment for all Americans. And it's a controversial topic. And as I said, we've been accused of getting outside of our swim lane. We have to deal with this. And so we are tackling this issue. We're engaging with Congress, both the Senate as well as the House, on what would a policing bill look like that would represent true reform of policing. Not refinement, not improvement, but fundamental reform of policing.
So listen, that may be out of your swim lane, but the business opportunities and diversity in your company is certainly not out of your swim lane. I hate the phrase color blindness. I think it should be color conscious. I think Melody Hobson said the other day, color brave, because I'm wondering what you do to foster people of color in your company, because career development is really not an accident. Somebody mentors you, somebody pulls you aside, somebody includes you. You're invited to different kind of meetings. What are you doing specifically at AT&T to make that happen?
It's got to be, you just said, it's got to be a conscious effort. It's not going to happen on its own. And as much as we might like to talk about color blindness or that we don't have racial tendencies and so forth, the reality is we tend to surround ourselves, if we're just left to our own devices, we surround ourselves by people who think like us, who act like us, and who look like us. It's natural. And so absent some kind of fundamental effort to drive diversity, it's not going to happen on its own. And so you have to put in place mechanisms and programs and efforts and track them and build a culture around it, because it's not going to happen on its own.
Everybody always says they want to do that, Randall, but the figures tell a different story. When you look at the workforce, you look at diversity in the top positions in the C-suites, you look at diversity in the managerial levels, it's not there. Not much really has changed.
I would be hard pressed to argue with you on that, Gail. And look, I think all of us in corporate America are saying, I better look in the mirror myself too. And have we, AT&T, done enough? And you know what?
What's your answer? What's your answer?
No, I would have to answer candidly, me as CEO, I have not done enough. And there is more that we need to do. And I think our traditional diversity and inclusion efforts, I think they've been a really good start, but I think it's now time to step these up and to think differently about diversity and inclusion and how we begin to truly move the needle in this regard.
Because do you agree, people say we have equality, but it's not a question of equality, it's a question of equality and equity. Because you can give everybody the same computers, that's equality. But if they're not set up to know how to work the computer, have the proper apparatus to go with the computer, that's not the equity. You're not set up for success, is the term I've often heard in business America.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue. And I think we're all going to have to be mindful and we're going to have to accept it. We're going to have to admit it. We're going to have to say we have a problem. And now we're going to have to get after it. We're business people. Once we've identified a problem, I don't think there's anybody in the world better than American business people at addressing a problem. Okay. So here's a situation where we have a problem. We need to get after it and tackle it as we do as business people.
And what's the reaction you're getting from fellow CEOs? I thought Alexis Ohanian did something that I thought was extraordinary. He gave up his board seat at Reddit. And I said, but Alexis, you could have just added a person of color. And when I say this, it's not just add a person of color, it's adding a qualified person of color. And there are a lot of people like that. He said, yeah, I could have done that. I could have added someone, but I wanted to send a message that was more than just symbolism, that I'm giving up this seat because I think it's important for you, whoever that is, to have a seat at the table. I think that's very powerful.
It has to start at the top, and your board better reflect what you want all the way down into your company, because if you don't affect it at the most senior levels of the company, it doesn't find its way down to the bottom. But I want to challenge something you just said.
Okay.
That we don't want to just put a black person on our board. It needs to be a qualified black person. We need to stop qualifying that. If somebody's going to come on the board of AT&T, they're obviously going to be qualified. And I don't think we ought to feel compelled to say qualified with black.
Oh, that's a good point.
Putting a black person on our board, we don't have to say they're qualified. They're a black person, they're on our board.
Randall, that's such a good point. You know what? I never thought of it that way, because I've heard too many people in my ear say, well, they just put so-and-so on whatever position because they're black. And I've always taken umbrage to that, to say, well, I wouldn't be me, fill in the blank. So-and-so wouldn't be there if they weren't qualified to do it. So you're right. You don't need to.
We shouldn't be defensive about that. I tell you, if somebody comes on the AT&T board, they're qualified. Okay.
You're so right. So are you satisfied with what's happening in your own house? It doesn't sound like you are.
No, of course I'm not. I mean, look, just the data doesn't support that I should be satisfied. So why would I be satisfied? Am I satisfied that we right now as a board and as an executive team are focused on this and we're committed to moving the needle? Yes, I'm satisfied that we're focused and we're oriented, but we got to go. We got to make an impact. We got to.
Do you have a plan to do that, Randall? I understand you're stepping down July 1st. Are you still?
I am. I'll be. In fact, I'm about to host my last board meeting as CEO here in the next couple of minutes, and I'm being replaced by a gentleman named John Stanky,
who is another Randall, who's another white man. That it seems like that would have been an opportunity to have a woman or a person of color.
Fair challenge, right? Yeah. And to your point, we ran a process.
I'm sure Mr. Stanky's very nice. Nothing against Mr. Stanky. Just want to say.
We ran a process, and our process landed where it landed with Mr. Stanky. But I will tell you, Mr. Stanky has made probably the biggest moves in media in our acquisition of Warner Media, being the first to actually institute and institutionalize diversity requirements in our media business. And if you're going to be in front of the camera or behind the camera, we have diversity tracking and requirements in terms of what diversity looks like in a media business, which is unheard of before we came in doing this in media. So I think John is going to prove that he will move the needle for AT&T even further than I took it. And I'm actually very energized with what he's doing right now with this issue.
Well, go Mr. Stanky. Very interesting name for that job. Go Mr. Stanky. And Randall, we're cheering you on in your next chapter. Do you know what are your plans? Have you decided yet?
I told my wife, I committed to her, I promised her that I would make no commitments for 6 months. And she said, yeah, right. My biggest worry, Gail, is in 2 months, she's going to look at me and say 6 months is too long.
No, she's going to be glad you're home. You're one of the good guys, Randall Stephenson. Thank you very much for
Thank
taking
you,
the
Gail.
time.
Good talking
I
to
really
you.
appreciate it.